Welcome to Redefining Engagement. I'm Francesca Dumas, Director of Audience Development and Strategy at Contribly. And in this show, I speak to leaders and innovators in the media industry so that we can bring tips, wisdom, ideas, and even some things to avoid so that we can all do more engagement better. So without further ado, let's move on to our next guest. Hi, Gerson. How are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm not too bad at all. I guess today we're doing something a little bit different. We're still going to be talking about engagement, but you came up with this fantastic idea, which also makes me slightly nervous, which is to interview me on engagement this time. And I am so thrilled that someone with so much experience in the whole engagement space, especially with the amazing work that you already do in the Netherlands, is interviewing me. So first of all, thank you so much for being the one to lead this conversation this time.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. But it was not my idea to do the interview myself. You asked me. I did the suggestion to have yourself interviewed.
So true.
Yeah,
but
okay.
Who better to get interviewed by than you?
I don't know, but we'll see.
Don't be so modest.
Yeah. You're nervous?
A little bit.
Yeah?
It's sometimes when you have a lot of big ideas, sometimes you want to just know that that you're clear with what you're presenting. Yeah. So let's see how it goes.
Yeah. Well, you interview journalists and we are also not used to answer questions. We ask the questions. So now you're like in our shoes.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about you first. I asked ChatGPT to do some research, of course, and let's fact check. But first, your name, Francesca Dumas, sounds French?
Yes, very much so. I am English, French, Spanish.
And yeah, you speak fluently English, Spanish. Are you French? Are you English? Are you Spanish?
If you look at me, if I divided my blood up in a sense, it's 50% English, and then 3/4 of the rest is Spanish, and then 1/4 is French. So in terms of blood, it's like that. In terms of passport, it is French-English.
And what do you feel? Where do you feel at home, or how do you think? You think in English?
I feel at home in Spain. When I'm in neutral mode, I'm English. When I'm excited, I'm Spanish. And when I'm miserable or angry, I'm French.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Must be difficult for your environment.
Oh, yeah, bless them. Poor people around me. Definitely.
All right. You love tea, dogs, and theater.
Oh, yes. All of those.
True?
Yeah.
Yeah? I have a big crossing St. Bernard's center. It's like huge. And you were a high school teacher and a stage manager in theaters? Yeah.
Yes. So I became a teacher. So I've always worked with audiences in a sense. I would say theater, definitely audiences. I would almost argue that secondary schools, which is where I worked, and I worked in some pretty inner city schools, lots of gang problems, that kind of thing. Also an audience in a way. You have a room full of teenagers that aren't necessarily interested in being there most of the time, and you have to engage them and you have to try and get a result out of them at the end, but in the most engaging way possible. So there's a lot that you can learn from that, actually.
Yeah, I can imagine. And what was your childhood dream career?
Oh, that is a really good question. I was one of those people who loved everything that I didn't know. So anything that I was learning, I was excited about. So I became obsessed with being everything. I remember my careers day sitting there and saying, if I start doing this and then I want going down law or something like that, can I then become a vet? And they were like, that's a little bit more difficult. And I went, but could I study biology maybe in my late 20s and then become a vet? And they're like, yes, technically you could do all these things. And I was like, okay, great. So yeah, it doesn't always add up to where you're going to end up. If you want to do everything, it's a little bit impossible.
Yeah, I think I can relate to that. Yeah.
What did you want to be?
A heart surgeon.
Wow.
I failed. Yeah. I started doing medicine, but I quit after 3 years and made a shift to journalism because I liked it a lot more. So yeah, that's why. You also went to journalism, to The Guardian, right?
Yeah.
How did you land it?
It was extremely random. I was actually brought in by someone that I knew, and I started in a sales role, and then it kind of built up to becoming something completely different at the time. And that's when I started working with the engagement team and the team that originally was exploring how do we get audiences more involved in the news? And it kind of just spiraled into creating what was now Contribly.
Mhm. And we all know The Guardian for its early adoption of user engagement, of course, user-generated content also.
Mm-hmm.
One early example I remember was the big pothole story. Do you know what I mean?
Probably.
Where people could point out on a map where the pothole was, and then they could tell the, well, I don't know, the municipality, there's a pothole, so please restore them. What was the moment you fell in love with user engagement?
I would say that's a really good question. I would
Do
say
you remember the moment it hit you?
it was actually learning about one of the call outs that The Guardian created that surprised me so much. And they created a call out which was for Catalan Day. Obviously, The Guardian is a UK newspaper. Everything that they're writing is in English. And they asked people who's celebrating Catalan Day in Catalunya. And they received so much content, and it went viral, and they weren't expecting it, especially because they don't kind of target that audience. And this was before all of the big protests and everything happening in Barcelona and in the rest of Catalonia. And I think that's when I realized actually we don't necessarily know our audience as well as we think. And also sometimes asking some really simple questions can almost unveil what's going to happen in the future. And the thousands of contributions that came in were so high quality, were so detailed, were really talking about readers' issues and problems and why they were celebrating. And then to see that unravel into protests and everything else, and actually already know the audience who feel very strongly about that, was such a special moment. And then when you start looking at the individual stories, you realize there's a pattern overall of when you engage, you learn so much and you can become so much more relevant. And I think there were so many things, but that moment it kind of clicked for me that really we should be inviting people in to speak more instead of broadcasting out. Yeah.
And did it play a role that it is in Spain?
Say again?
Did it play a role that it was in Spain?
Yeah, probably. Without realizing, yes, probably, because I always find it so fascinating how you can so easily pinpoint common themes that people feel strongly about and that we almost miss when we generalize so much. So, for example, obviously being someone who is a mix of cultures, I can see how the English people in the region or foreigners that aren't Spanish in the region, for example, feel so strongly about roundabouts in Spain because Spanish people don't have the same rules about roundabouts as the rest of Europe. So,
oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And that kind of thing, like when you tap into something that people feel strongly about, you can just see the engagement kind of lift. So if you bring up certain topics that make people feel like they're coming together, there's so much power around that. So if you were at a party and you mentioned, oh, the roundabouts, everyone will then go, isn't it crazy that they go around the roundabout on the outside lane? Like, we don't understand why they do this. Why are they taught to do this? There's no logic. And then everyone kind of chips in and they really want to understand, like, how are people being taught and why is it this way? And I always just find it so fascinating that when you understand lots of cultures and you really can go into that people do really feel strongly and want to engage in those types of conversations.
This is something you know. So the bigger question maybe is, how do you open up as a journalist and kind of are open to these things you don't maybe know or you should know because it's your audience. But how do you do this?
I think it's about the level of questions. So I think for me, when I look at it, I see the absolute starting point for so many news brands is a form somewhere that says, hey, send us your news. Imagine being a person that comes to a website and it says something like, send us your news. When you look at that, you go, what news? Because there are so many things in your life that you could pin out or pinpoint. I think it's about asking more specific questions, but that start a little bit more open-ended. So what are your opinions on the differences between, I'll go back to the roundabouts, the differences between your countries and the new country that you might live in, for example? What are the things that really stand out, the big surprises you had when you moved to this new country? And all of a sudden you might receive quite a few. It's open-ended enough, but it's specific enough that people might go, oh, actually, I was really surprised. So for example, for me, when I moved to the UK, I was really surprised about how there are guys' nights out and girls' nights out. That was not really a thing for me growing up in Spain. All of us just mixed. It's a little bit more segregated in the UK. It's my observation. I have no facts on this. However, it's something that I observed. And if you start, like, if someone asked me that question, I would straight away have something that comes up for me. And I think then when you start receiving all of that content, you can then start seeing patterns. You can then start seeing like those topics that come up, and you can dive into those in so much more detail. And then they can become a debate. And sometimes you'll be surprised, like for the Irish Times, I loved that they started out with some very open-ended parents questions. How are you dealing with homeschooling and COVID, that kind of thing? And the amount of content that came in and the more specific they became on all of these verticals that were coming out of these questions ended up with them creating a whole newsletter just for parenting, because those topics became so relevant and so interesting that they started calling on teachers saying, hey, what's your advice around this, or nurseries? And I think that's the beauty of it. I think questioning, we know questioning is so important. As an ex-teacher, we are trained on the theory of questioning for months and months and months. And it's about how specific we are, and also not being scared to get it wrong. And I think that's the thing that stops us.
But not too specific, I guess. I mean, what's the definition of a good question?
I would say when you ask a question, come up with the worst possible answer that you might receive and the best possible answer that you might receive. And then you'll know how good a question you might be asking. And you'll do it in a classroom anyway. You prepare with what the kids might answer, and you will still always be surprised. But if you kind of make a little bit of an assumption of what they might respond, the worst and the best, you can actually tailor your question to be able to open it up a bit more or to limit it a bit more depending on where you're going. So putting yourself in the potential shoes. Do you agree?
Could I make a GPT of this?
Yes, I'm sure you could.
I'm going to try this.
Is that how you would do it? What do you think is the best way of questioning?
Well, yeah, the questions we ask are more about a subject, what people want to know about a subject or don't know. But like you describe it now, it's more about how you're dealing with something or how you're feeling about something. And that's interesting to think about that in a way that you see the trends and you can do stories about what you know your audience is experiencing. Interesting. I'm going to think about it more.
I think don't you think it's so interesting that it's so easy to go towards facts but every decision that we make as humans pretty much in reality are led by emotion. We do anything that we do is because we either care, we think it's important. And we miss that out so much when we, in the news in general, like even sometimes when we interview or approach a situation, we do it with such stern. My mom watches the news every morning, and pretty much every morning at some point I will walk into the room and she will be crying. And the thing is, that's what leads people. But it's not what emotions do we want people to feel, but it's how can we understand the emotion, and then we might understand a bit more of the question.
The emotions are scary sometimes, right?
Oh yeah.
Especially for journalists who are factual.
Yes.
Yeah, true. Okay. So you were at The Guardian, experiencing all those mind-blowing things that were going on and doing engagement. How did it go from there to Contribly?
Yes. So it was a fun story. So we were within The Guardian creating all of these tools, and The Guardian had a big change in management. So within that, they didn't want to be a tech provider anymore. And I think it's a bit of that story of buy or build. Comes up a lot. Yeah. It's hard to look after a product when you build it yourself, and especially you're nodding quite profusely. When you build a product yourself, it's fantastic because you can create something that really meets your needs. However, when you build products yourself and you start having 10, 20, it's actually hard to keep up with the trends within those sectors individually as they go along. And so we were the team to create it. So we took over the tool. The Guardian continued as our client, and it opened up the box for us to get so many more in, but also for us to rewrite so much of the product based on what we'd learned. And I think that's the other thing. When you're building something yourself, you build it and you have a theory in your mind, and then you go and start trying it, using it, and you realize your audience don't always react the same way, or they don't use it the same way. It ends up as a completely new thing. And sometimes you need to redo things based on the new information that you have. So we rewrote it so that things like, and I think it's still a mistake that a lot of newsrooms make, having separate areas for your audience to engage. So if you think of a whole website, when you say this is your area, you're almost automatically separating your audience from the core of what you do. It's like, oh, you little audience, you can sit over here, instead of integrating it into everything that you do and really making it part of the everyday work, which is engaging. So the first thing that we did was rewrite it in a way that we could copy and paste engagement into articles, so that was, you're part of what we're doing. You're not this separate thing. To do that, obviously, you have to rewrite loads for it not to be this separate piece, that kind of thing.
And what was the idea of Contribly?
Well, I think we're looking at newsrooms and we're looking at why are journalists and our editors not necessarily engaging directly. And I think the first things are there are a lot of barriers to entry for journalists. The first is there is fear. There's a bit of worry around, well, how am I going to receive content? How much am I going to receive? How am I going to moderate and verify all of that content? Sometimes it's what if I don't receive anything, which is also, I can understand a concern, which teaches you so much about your audience. But all of those things stop people from starting in the first place. So the first idea was, how do we create the tech that allows the journalist to do this really easily without needing to worry about it? And then the second part of it is, well, once we have removed these barriers to entry, what does it look like to actually engage? What does it look like? How are we asking these questions? What are we allowing our readers to send? Allowing's really the wrong word, but how are we incentivizing them? How do we understand what the value exchange is for our readers? Because if you think about it, every single day, people are posting on social media. And every single day, those people are getting a value exchange. They post something, they get a like, they get a comment, they get a share, they feel good about themselves. Something happens. Whereas currently, a lot of the time when we're engaging with news brands, and not all of them, because obviously you're doing completely differently, but when we're engaging with news brands, we will, let's say the news brand receives 100 pieces of content. Imagine 100 thoughts, 100 debates, 100 photos. And the journalist only has time to publish or use 5 of them. You have 95 people who have gone to the effort, and this is emotional, gone to the effort of trying to engage, and then nothing happens. And that's 95 people who are very, very unlikely to ever come back and do it again.
Yeah.
That wastes trust, wastes engagement, dilutes what we do. So really the focus was, and I think the thing that we really focus as much as possible is, how do we make sure that our readers have a value exchange? How do we make sure that they feel heard? Because there are more ways of communicating now than ever before. Yet I don't think people necessarily feel heard. How do we make sure that even if they're not the highlighted, most interesting piece, that something happens where they feel like, okay, my contribution was worthwhile and I would like to come back and do that again. And I'd like to show others that I've been doing it so that they can come and join me in that kind of process.
And is the tool like it is now, is it finished?
Oh, never. Oh my God, the amount of ideas. My product team hates me currently because, so the way that I see it is there's 3 core elements to everything that we do. The first is content. So like, how can we help make content better, more accessible, higher quality? The second is engagement, which is how can we make the experience as great as possible for our end users? And the third is data. So everything that we do needs to hit some of these pieces. On the content piece, it's how can we make it better for the journalists to receive, to moderate, to use, to understand the audience based on what they're saying and sending and doing. And then the engagement is, how are we publishing that instantly? How are we getting people to vote for each other's content? How are we potentially making it swipe to agree, swipe to disagree? The amount of ideas I've got is a little bit ridiculous. And I need more people to want to test these with me. So any volunteers is always welcome. And that last piece, the data piece, is because I think we receive so much data in a newsroom now, so much data to tell you if you're doing well or not well. But that data isn't necessarily directly about our audience. A lot of the time, it's about time spent on page. It's about how many views we've had, which doesn't actually tell you anything about the people that are trying to engage with you. It's a hint. Someone might be spending, 5 minutes on a page, but they might be disagreeing with everything that they're reading. That doesn't mean engagement to me. So the data piece is very much, what can I understand about this audience, the audience who are so engaged that they are going to spend time actually sending content or asking questions, or that audience is so key. They're the most likely to share. So data that really tells us about them so that we can get more people like them, the loyal ones that are going to grow.
And which metric do you use to decide whether an engagement campaign adds value to journalism?
Oh, great question. For me, it's a few things. The first is obviously the number of contributions is really important, because they're not just people landing on your page, they're people who are taking the time to send. We also look at the quality of the content coming in. So journalists, when they're going through the tool, usually like they're approving content that comes in, but we have a ranking system in Contribly so that journalists can then go and find the most interesting and come back to it and use it in their articles and use it to respond to questions. So we're looking at that a lot, like the ratio, and we're actually trying to find ways for the AI to also help with that, looking at what journalists actually find interesting and important within those comments, and highlighting the potential ones that might be interesting, again, to speed that process. And so quality is massive, but also it's what people are saying. So I absolutely love one of the debates that GVA in Belgium wrote was they asked readers, do you think we should have a European army? And they received so many comments, so high quality compared to the questions that the comments they get on social media. I think because it's sending it directly to a newsroom, so much more thought through. And I think you've actually seen that as well, haven't you? Like
Sure.
the quality of responses is really interesting. But it was the amount of questions and points that the journalists would never have thought of before that really highlights how that is good for journalism. If the call out creates more articles that are more read and reach further audiences, for me, that is one of the pieces of data that we're looking at. So it's the outcomes from the call outs that are particularly interesting.
We're going to talk about journalism a bit more, but first, what kind of leader are you? I mean, you talked about your team that's going crazy about your ideas. But how are you as a leader?
I don't like to micromanage, although it's something that I have to challenge myself on all the time. I would say it's about authenticity. I am the first I don't know if there's a specific one, but I'm the first person to come and really explain what I'm going through today. And I'm extremely open. And I believe that the more open we are and the more we try and help each other, the more that we can grow as a team, because the strength of anything is the people that are in the team.
But you have a remote team, right? Or do you have an office?
We meet in the office once in a while when we are all in the same place. So we do have an office that we meet in, and it's such a special time when we do. However, I do feel like sometimes we get less work done when we're all in the same. Of course,
yeah.
We're just so excited. We're like puppies coming together. God, it's so nice to see each other.
Yeah, we all understand, of course.
Yeah, so we work remotely a lot. You might tell I'm in Spain right now. I don't know if that represents Spain automatically. But
yeah, sure. Yeah,
yeah, so we work remotely. We communicate all of the time. We do take a bit of our team meeting time to just check in to see how everybody's actually doing.
But it can be hard to do it remotely, right? I mean, you don't see the interaction between three people. You can miss certain emotions. It can be hard.
It can.
We all know from COVID, of course.
Yes. But I think everybody's getting more used to it. So we were doing it before it was cool. So that was very special. I cannot explain the stress I used to feel to find a white wall before COVID, because I never wanted people to think that I wasn't in an office, because I thought I would be seen badly. And when COVID came, I was like, at last, other people understand that we can actually work really well from home. I think the emotional piece is what's difficult is creating that safe environment. And if we approach things with authenticity, and we do say when something's annoying, and we do approach it without getting offended, you have to lead by example. I really do believe that. And I don't see it as a weakness to explain frustrations, or as long as you genuinely believe that everybody is, and it's hard to do, but everybody's doing the job for the right reasons. And people have to have the same values, because if they don't believe in what you're creating, then it's never going to work if they don't have the same vision.
Okay, back to journalism. For this podcast, Redefining Engagement, you interview journalists all over the world.
Yes.
Which individuals or organizations maybe do you regard as examples of innovative journalism?
Yours, absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm not just saying that. I'm genuinely not just saying that. I think the fact that you aren't scared to invite the readers in and to actually create products and do it at the speed that you've done. And I'm not telling you I'm not saying it hasn't been hard. There's absolutely no question in my mind that you have had 100,000 challenges. But the fact that you're willing to come together as a team to do that is such a strength, because so much of the teams do it in silos. Like, oh, we will take these 3 people and they will try this one thing. And if they find one hurdle, it's like, oh, well, it didn't work. And I think that approach of going, all of us are going to go into this and we are going to test this out for X amount of time and we are ready to be surprised by what happens is very special. And I don't think that happens enough. The others that stood out, obviously Mattia Peretti always comes out. There's some, but your question is really hard because
Yeah, I'm sure.
it's so hard. I interview people who have different roles and I find, so for example, what engagement means for someone working in data is a completely different thing to what engagement means for an editor or for an individual journalist or for the CEO of a company. And so I've got specific examples for like the ones that stand out for me in the
We
data
have time.
point. We
Go
have
on.
time. Okay, so I would say ones that really stand out to me. Carlos Calvé, so JC Calvé from Norway. He's particularly good and particularly interesting because a little bit like me, he doesn't necessarily only come from journalism. And I find that fascinating when someone comes from outside and is surprised by how we work in a newsroom.
Okay, yeah.
And partly, and I think there is such a strength from those people because those people understand they are slightly outside enough to be able to see it from the reader's point of view in such a different way. Not from the point of what we do is important, so it should be loved, but actually everyone's busy and they don't actually understand what we do and why it should be as important as it is. So I'd say that's one of them. And also from an AI data point of view, absolutely estupendo, fantastic. Who else would stand out? Mattia Peretti, from strategy point of view of really thinking about what we do and why we do it and articulating that and making sure the whole team is on there is a really, really good one. Dimitri is a great one. It was pretty recent, but obviously being one of the founders of the whole user needs model, he has so much to say and he has seen so many different types of newsrooms. Who else is a particularly good interview? Patty from Hearst. I have a passion point for local news. I really think while the world is getting bigger and more global, that actually people are trying to like protect the closest things to them, the things that they feel like they can control, because we feel like we have less control than ever. And turning to local, I think that's going to be potentially the future where we might move to, especially with all of the tech moving forward. People will trust local a little bit more, I believe.
No, I think it's true. I think studies also show this. And I also think that when it comes to user-generated content, it's easier because it feels closer to you than national brands you don't have any connection with. Yeah.
I think and it also depends on the topics. Talking about local topics, people feel engaged. But also if you're talking about, farming, I think it's not necessarily about, when it comes to user-generated content, I think it's more who you're specifically targeting. If it is very wide and I say, hey, everybody, what do you think of this? It's very different to saying people that work in medicine or people that work in farming, and you're calling out to a specific group of people. The moment that someone feels called out specifically, they are more likely to step up and go, actually, I do have an opinion on this and I have got expertise in it. So, and I think local has that same power. It's, hey, people from Altea in Spain.
You have something in common. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the bits that maybe make the difference. But there are people that work in local that I really love how they view engagement. And I'd say that group is one of them, especially the way that they approach trying new things is also, for me, it's the biggest piece for any newsroom is how they approach innovation. I find that it shows the flexibility of a team. It shows the leadership as well. If a whole newsroom can come together to do something very different and very new, it's such a challenge because you'll have so many personalities in that room. And if you can lead your whole team to do something new, it's a massive strength in leadership.
And would you choose trial and error or big project management approach?
Start with trial and error. I think when we do the big project management approach, it's great. However, you put so much energy and so you really push the whole team to do something. And when it fails, it's very hard to come back next week and say, okay, we have a new plan. You might find it very difficult to go. Whereas trial and error is in the sense of, we are thinking of doing this. Would this be useful? And getting the audience to feedback before you even go and create it might actually be a really interesting way of measuring the temperature before you do it.
Yeah. And when we talk about journalism and journalists in general, what do you think should change to do the audience good?
I think it's partly, and it's a very difficult mindset change, because journalists are fantastic. There's so much expected on them. There's so much more expectation than there ever has been before, not just in their craft, but in being digital, understanding the data, understanding everything that's happening. And that's a really big challenge. But I think if one thing would change for me, it's in print. Before, we used to do all of the work to write a piece of content and then send it off to print. And then it's, oh great, I've done my job. And now there is a change that is actually quite substantial, but it's hard to do the mental change, which is, I do all of my work, potentially inviting the audience in beforehand in an ideal world, but I do all of my work. And the moment I press send or print or publish online, that's actually the birth of your work. It's not the end of your work. And I think that then becomes a cycle that we find very difficult to come back to, because we're usually working on the next piece or the next project or the next topic.
But this is how it is since social media is here. So why don't we adopt to this?
I think it's partly around what we're praised for. I think potentially it's not the only thing. There are so many reasons why we don't do this. But I think if you have a whole team and they write a really amazing piece, we're so good at saying, that was a great piece, that was a great investigation, that was a great, but we don't necessarily praise on, oh my gosh, like that was amazing responses to the audience, and that you took it and you did something else with it based on the questions that then came in. I think we don't praise the bit that happens after enough for it to be seen as important. We kind of see it as someone else's job. And the other thing that's the problem is the silos. A journalist shouldn't have to be doing all of that work either. Why is it not potentially the marketing teams and the other teams that are accessing that content on the same platforms? Partly, I think it's a tech problem. I do think that a lot of journalists are using technology that was made for marketing teams when they are engaging, because obviously the market is so much bigger for marketing. So anyone that's creating tech is creating it for the marketing teams, because they're thinking, oh, we could get brands like Nike using what we're doing. And those things are kind of adapted to kind of try and fit newsrooms, which doesn't work. But also the tools that are being used aren't used by every single team. The marketing team will have a different CRM, potentially a different dashboard. Potentially they're using, I don't know, Qualifio, whereas the editorial team will be using the CMS in a different way. And so if you can't kind of peek in to see what's working for one, you can't then go, oh, I can pick that up for you because I can do something special with that. And that becomes really difficult as well.
Yeah, the strange thing I feel is that we all do the things that we do as a journalist for the audience. So why don't we value the input from the audience more, or what it does with your readers or your viewers? It's kind of strange.
And we potentially did used to do it. Like we used to have sources. We used to know loads of people in our community and, you know, have like probably a little black book with all of our contacts. And actually now that we've become digital, we almost don't go out as much. But also, we also forget online that we're talking to a human and that they have emotions and that you're asking them a favor in a sense when you are asking them to engage. It's not it's a request, but it's a request that you're asking someone to spend their time for free to do. And we should be more appreciative of the fact that they're doing that.
About social media, there's a lot of discussion about big tech and how social media is evolving. Do you think about a way we can cut loose from big tech and organize it for ourselves as maybe journalists, or I don't know, and maybe there's a role for Contribly also?
I think we compare ourselves to social media a bit too much, but it's not just compare. I think our audience don't necessarily understand the difference between social media and the news. And so we're fighting two battles. We're fighting a battle of what we see ourselves compared to social media, and we're fighting a battle of what our audience sees, and they're completely different things. On our side, social media is taking our time from our audience. But so is the gym, and so are the children, and so is we aren't the same thing. I think we need to create different spaces on instead of just publishing content and here is a list of content coming in, we need to be providing a different product that audiences can feel heard and listened to and engage with, that is a little bit more active, because that's the thing that makes us different. And on the other side, for audiences, if it's clickbait, they're not going to click, because you might have seen the trend, which is, here's the clickbait title. One person goes, reads the article, comes back, puts it in the comments. By the way, this was the answer. You don't need to leave. I've given you the answer. Whereas if we're giving people reasons to come, as in we're investigating this, or we want to know how this has affected you, and you're bringing people to engage in not just send your content, but also do something with it that creates something that they can't do on social, that's when we will be different. And that could be the pothole example. Hey, a pothole's affecting you. Come and show us, like, would you mind taking a photo of the pothole in front of your house? Send it and we will put it live on this map. But not only will we put it live on this map, we will also pull in the data or the information from the local council, and we will show you which ones have been fixed. And instead of you sending off an email to the council saying, hey, this pothole is really, really annoying, and then not hearing back for 6 months, but not knowing that actually in the north of the city, they've actually just fixed all of the potholes. They've just not reached your area. That's a completely different product. That is something where we're holding power to account, but we're also giving people a voice where they feel like they're heard. And I know a lot of people hate potholes, and that is not necessarily the best example, but it could also be, floods are happening in our city. Show us how the floods are affecting you, so that other people can go on and explore how it's affecting their neighbor's house, because they might not care about what's happening on the other side of the city, because they care about leaving their house to be able to get to the school tomorrow morning. Those kind of things. And it's the same you can give examples for every single type of piece that we're writing.
Okay. Looking 10 years ahead. 10 years is a long time.
Yeah.
What role do you see user-generated content or engagement playing in editorial workflows?
10 years.
Oh, 5.
10 years. I'm hoping it's something that's completely normal. I'm hoping that tools like Contribly or any other tool that comes up with something amazing, like I'm not stopping anyone, is integrated into the full CMS of what we're doing, that we have enough information to be able to suggest call outs to, and that potentially this is something that we're thinking about every day. I don't think that's the biggest picture. I think we get to a point where our readers are coming directly to our sites because they understand the value. I think there is a massive marketing piece that needs to actually happen. And that's the dirty word for journalists a little bit. But I'm hoping that by then we have become better at telling our own story, and also getting readers to understand that how essential we are. And I think I give the example of farming. I had a massive debate about this recently, which was our audience doesn't understand how important journalism is. And this is on average. People are moving away from out. And, but this is a bit like farming. If we removed farmers and food, all of a sudden tomorrow, people would realize straight away. Do we need to get to that point where we remove all news for people to realize how important it is to have good quality information? And someone said, oh, but the tractors come in and make it better. The technology will come in and we need less farmers. I was like, no. We aren't the tractors. We are the tomato. That's the bit that we're missing. It's like, we are that piece. And part of me, the tiny bit of French in me is full revolution. Like, how about we just stop all news for a few days and show everybody how important it is? And yes, potentially there are some floods and loads of people and it's worse because we're not there. Maybe it doesn't need to be that way. But where do I see it? I think we will know our audiences better. We will know them individually. We will have the right data for the journalists to also understand that. Not just the marketing teams to be able to see, I've got this many subscribers, but actually we will know the individuals and the segments better, and we'll be able to actually invite them in a way that is constant. It's the same as going to the butcher's every day and asking him, hey, have you bought more meat today?
All right. So we have to bond with the audience. Yeah.
We are the connectors at the end of the day. Yeah. Do you agree? We connect people with information. We connect businesses with other people, but we're missing the connection piece to be able to flow every day and not just do engagement once, but do engagement over time.
I know you as a positive and an energetic person and enthusiastic about engagement, but you also run a company. How do you combine those things? And you have goals for Contribly, and on the other hand, you have like goals for journalism. How do you do this?
Well, Gus, and I'm really bad at that.
Yeah.
And I need to tell myself off all the time because I'm really bad at, how do I word it? I don't think about the money enough. I think
Kind of
about,
commercial. Yeah.
I'm not commercial enough, and I know I'm not. And it's an issue. I don't think many people go into journalism for the commercial side of it. If not, I would have been going more into sports, I think, because there are so many communities that want to engage with sports that makes sense. But I see it as, if our partners join us, it's because they believe in the same things. And every time someone new comes on, it means that we can build more and we can do better and we can test more. And if we are centralizing some of that testing and that user engagement, that everybody can help each other. And that's how I see it. And it's very hard to do both. I think sometimes I bring the price down way too much to make sure as many people can join as possible. And at the same time, if someone can afford it, I'm like, well, you kind of need to pay so that everybody can start doing this, so that we can all learn together, so that we can all move forward. And it is a difficult, maybe I need someone more commercial to come into the team when we're big enough to help me focus on the business piece. But the way I see it is that I would like us to become the source of knowledge and experience for all news brands. And and I think the difficulty that I'm finding right now is that because I'm working with so many news brands across, well, I would say across Europe, but we've now got a little bit of America in there, and we're all learning together. All of that knowledge is kind of sitting inside me and the team, and sharing that is one of my challenges. And I want it to become something where anyone that is working in a news organization can come in and say, I have this idea, or I'd like to try this. Are there any learnings from someone else? And that we can pop up, here's someone else that did something similar. These are the barriers to entry, the things that they learned they should have done. These are the things that worked really well, so that we can help everyone move it forward faster. Because what you were saying about trial and error, I think when we make a lot of errors, and it takes time to learn, if we can speed that up for everybody, we will eventually do better.
Okay.
Contribly, and everyone will. So that's how I see it.
Shall we end with a free tip?
A tip?
Yeah, from you.
Okay.
What's the first practical step a traditional newsroom can take tomorrow to embed community thinking?
Start asking your audience questions, and and do it manually. I'm not saying buy tech to do it. Just, how about we start inviting them in a way that you haven't done before, and just see what happens. And guess what? If you receive too much content, how about you just say to everybody, oh my gosh, thank you so much. We were not expecting to receive so much. This is what we've learned. Give something back. And please don't forget to say thank you, because I cannot tell you how important it is to give people a tiny bit of common decency and appreciate the time that they've given. And it literally is just one email, and sometimes it makes the world of difference.
Yeah.
The
I
humanity.
can relate. Yeah. It was really nice talking to you. And I think I can speak for all your listeners and viewers. It's nice to know you a little better, to know what is behind Francesca and what your motivation is. So thank you.
Thank you for saying that you would interview me, even though I kind of put you on the spot. Thank you for the
You're
idea.
welcome. Yeah, truly loved it. Thank you.
Speak to you soon.